7 o'clock in the PM. Do you know where your fantasy football lineups are? Well, if you don't, we're going to help you find them here over the next 2 hours, as this is Fantasy Football Night in America live on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network for October 3rd, 2024. Hi, hello, how are you? My name is Eric Balkman. You perhaps have connected with me on the X at Eric Balkman. You may know me from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the RotoViz High Stakes Slowdown, and of course, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. So glad to talk with you tonight. It's so funny because everybody's complaining about the Chiefs right now because the offense has been lackluster, what have you. However, they're 4-0, and they are at the forefront of the conversation tonight, not only with their running backs, but their wide receivers as well. And I'm sure Travis Kelce is going to insert himself into the conversation tonight. For the next 2 hours, we have you. We will lead you right into Thursday night football with the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'm pleased to be joined by a guy who's never co-hosted this show before, but he's co-hosted many other shows on the RotoViz radio stream. You know him from X at the Cat Dad FF. Please welcome in Kevin Szafraniec. Kevin, so much fun are we going to have tonight? And I'm so glad that you're hanging out with me for these next 120 minutes.
Yeah, I really appreciate you asking me to come on. I say, even like as old as I get, I'm definitely middle-aged now, but I still like a kid on Christmas. As soon as when Thursday night football is about to hit, it's like I still have that childlike joy.
You're not jaded yet. Yeah, exactly.
No, I'm a Browns fan. I'm plenty jaded, but they're not on tonight, so we're gravy. We're gravy.
Right, exactly, which is great. And we'll get into the Browns too tonight. I actually like Deshaun Watson this week as a start in fantasy football for sure. Coming up on tonight's show, we'll go around the NFL. Plenty of topics to talk about, including the Kansas City backfield. We'll talk about the Miami Dolphins sans Tua Tagovailoa. We'll get into the Rams as well as the Packers receivers with perhaps no Christian Watson and maybe no Romeo Doubs this week. More on that. Thursday Night Football preview will take center stage at the bottom of the hour. We'll talk about Bucky Irving, Cade Otton. We'll get into Tyler Algier, Kyle Pitts as well with some, I don't want to say breaking news, but maybe some stuff that we'll get into that just came out about Pitts about 20 minutes or so ago. In the second hour, Kevin and I are going to build an FFPC Weekly Challenge Week 5 lineup. You can feel free to submit it if you'd like. You'll win a ton of money, I promise. Just kidding. I can't promise that, but you never know. You might. And then starter sits will complete the show tonight. We'll get into some Zach Moss, Josh Downs, Isaiah Likely, and Kyler Murray conversation. That'll be the show. And you can enjoy Thursday Night Football in all its glory right after that. I want to bring up the FFPC Weekly Challenge right away in case you're wondering, hey, how I thought FFPC was season long. Drafting season's over. What are they still doing there? Well, we do offer a weekly challenge in various formats. It's great. There's no draft. There's no salary cap. You build whatever players you want on your team. The only stipulation is you can only pick one player per team. So if you want Kyler Murray, you can't have Marvin Harrison. If you want Saquon Barkley, well, not this week, but if you want Saquon Barkley, you can't have Jalen Hurts, that kind of thing. 10 or 12 players, depending upon if you want to play with kickers or defenses. And then $35 to enter or $200. You can win up to $2,500. Just go to myffpc.com. That's myffpc.com. That's where to go. You can always scan the QR code that our wonderfully talented producer, Matt Deutsch, has put up on the screen tonight. You can scan that. That'll take you right to the website, and you can enter. The Thursday night challenge will kick off or will end at kickoff tonight of the Thursday night game, but you can still play in the Sunday challenge as well. All the Sunday games, including the London game and that as well. Now, let's get into the Chiefs backfield here, Kevin. And this is great because Unwary Might, watching us on Twitch, already teed us up for our opening conversation. Yo, what's up, fellas? Help me please decide Najee Harris against Dallas, or do I roll with Kareem Hunt against New Orleans? Now, in order to properly answer this question, we have to talk about what's going on with the Chiefs backfield. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kevin, is limited in today's practice. The Chiefs already opened his window off of IR. Now, he has an interesting, I want to be careful how I say this. He does not have a traditional NFL injury, which is on IR. He was having PTSD. I've heard different things, injury recovery. I heard he witnessed perhaps a shooting in front of him. So he's having some issues with that. He is now practicing for Kansas City, which is good. Kareem Hunt who was not on the roster at the start of the year, is now on the roster and has been the last couple of weeks. And oh, by the way, he led him in rushing and in carries last week. He was limited in practice this week as well. 16 touches for 85 yards. It's a Monday night game. So you will have to figure out what's going on with Hunt and Edwards-Helaire prior to the, I believe, 1 p.m. kickoff of the Steelers this week. But if you had your druthers, who would you play? Would it be Harris or would it be Hunt for you in week 5, Kevin?
Definitely Harris at this point. I say it does look like Jaylen Warren and Cordarrelle Patterson are still out for the Steelers. So I think this is pretty much a no-brainer, even if we knew that Hunt was really going to get, the lion's share of the workload there. I think Najee, even though I'm not historically a Najee lover.
Would anybody admit to it if they are? I don't think anybody would even admit to that anymore.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of almost like a no-brainer, even if we didn't have all this uncertainty in Kansas City right now. And even with, it's kind of a mess. I don't know, something inside of me still feels like Samaje Perine is the best rest of season play in that backfield.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing we need to figure out here, because Perine was a guy that people were picking up all over the place, I think, prior to week 1 in the FFPC, because we didn't know what was going on with Kansas City, trying to figure out the backup. Now that we know Pacheco is on IR, he's probably going to be on IR for another month and a half, maybe even 2 months, maybe even miss the rest of the season. I still, and I feel like this is a cop-out answer, but the way I approach this is collect Kansas City Chiefs running backs and just wait. Wait for somebody to get hurt, wait for somebody to step forward, and just have these pieces on your team. I picked up Carson Steele in like one league, I think, when he was still available. I'm ready to cut him now after last week. He fumbles on his first carry. They trust Perine. They trust Hunt. And now Clyde Edwards-Helaire is coming back. I think that the key is if you have any of these guys, it's of those three, Perine, Hunt, and CEH. I think those are the three I want to keep on my team. I'm fine cutting Steele right now. But if I have any of those guys, I'm trying to keep them around as much as possible. FFPC, 12-team leagues, 20-man rosters. These are the players I want to have at the end of my bench, Kevin.
Yeah, and I don't know. I was surprised when they re-signed CEH, and I don't know if it's more just because he knows the system or what, but I still don't have a lot of hope for him moving forward. It's sad to hear, that we all heard that kind of he was on non-football injury for PTSD. So your heart goes out to the guy, but
yeah,
I've been burned by him so many times in fantasy drafting, even like still drafting him in rookie drafts over Jonathan Taylor. Just still cuts deep. It still cuts so deep. So I think that Perine is the way to go rest of the season, because I'm in my mind I'm basically saying like Pacheco's done for the year. For the fantasy year. If you're lucky enough to have him on your roster and he comes back for the playoffs, like, are you going to trust him, throw him right in your roster? So I'm kind of looking at it in that way. And I think that Perine is just going to kind of grow on that team over time, because he has been good. And Hunt really has not been good over the last couple of years as far as from an efficiency standpoint. So, he's if I'm going to roll the dice on any of them, if I could just pick one of the three, Perine's the way I'm going for sure.
Last week, Perine ended up 5 carries, 14 yards, which isn't great, but he did get a touchdown, which is something Kareem Hunt didn't do. And weirdly enough, Samaje Perine, who we thought was going to be the pass catcher, didn't see a target last week too. I think that's more of an aberration than anything else. I think he's going to continue to catch passes. But I think right now it's Hunt and Perine. I want to keep CAH. I looked at my pickups last night in all my leagues, and my God, did I get a ton of Clyde Edwards-Helaire on my. I didn't even bid that much on him, but apparently I'm on an island with CEH this year. Let's go to Washington real quick. Austin Eckler was a full participant in practice today for the Commanders. He was coming off that concussion. Brian Robinson has yet to practice this week. And the game that the Commanders have this week is a semi-juicy one with the Cleveland Browns. Now, the total on this game, and I know you're a Browns fan, 43.5. To me, that seems low. I think this is kind of turns into a bit of a shootout. And if that's the case, I think Eckler is a guy you got to find a way to start this week. And I'll even go as far to say, like, McNichols, 4 teams on bye, there's injuries. You could do worse than him as the second running back, again, if Robinson is out this week, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I say it was nice seeing the Jeremy McNichols blast from the pass last week with the 2 touchdowns. But yeah, I mean, Eckler has looked good when he's been in there. I mean, catches a lot of passes. And I don't think that whoever that number 1 running back is in Washington is definitely worth a start.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you could even go to say, especially as you brought up with the bye starting to roll in, like, yeah, even the running back too in that offense. I mean, Jaden Daniels opens up a lot of things for that. Say what you will about Cliff Kingsbury, but he has, one thing he did do pretty well in Arizona was lift up James Conner and, design a good run game. So
yeah,
I am 100% okay with rolling with the Commanders running backs this week. I mean, preferably we'd be seeing Brian Robinson going on, but like the top 2, I'm 100% okay with throwing them in lineups.
Let's move on to the Colts backfield here. Jonathan Taylor. Number 1, Kevin, I'm going to ask you this. You ever heard of a mild high ankle sprain before? Because before this week, and now apparently multiple guys have it. What is a mild high ankle sprain?
Yeah, you got me on that one. All I know is if he's on the field, I'm going to definitely downgrade him a little bit, but you can't take him out of your lineup, right? Like,
yeah, I think if he's active, you play him for sure. I was actually ticked off. I missed out on Trey Sermon in a lot of spots last night. The Colts this week in their matchup are taking on the Jaguars, which you say, ooh, that's going to be great. But there is a bit of uncertainty. Number 1, they're on the road. Number 2, we don't know who the quarterback is going to be between Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco. I happen to think that it's actually better for everyone except for Anthony Richardson. If it is Joe Flacco, I think it's better for Pittman. It's better for Downs. It's better for Pierce. It's better for Mitchell. It's better for Taylor. It's better for everybody.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of like, I don't root for guys to stay hurt or get hurt or anything like that. But for my Colts shares, I'm actually rooting for Joe Flacco to get the start this week against Jacksonville. Let's just say, because Taylor still hasn't practiced yet this week, let's just say that Taylor is out. We'll know by 1 p.m. How comfy do you feel about Trey Sermon in your starting lineup this week?
After on the surface, not good, but then just kind of doing a little bit of digging today, I looked at, last year, the only time that he got a full workload was against the Steelers in week 15. And he had 17 carries for 88 yards, no targets, performed like essentially no negative FPOE or, points above or below expectation. He's pretty much like right on the line. So, I mean, he proved that he can get you pretty much whatever he's given. So if he gets a full workload, I mean, he could come through in a pinch. I would hope that you wouldn't have to throw him in your RB1 or RB2, but maybe a flex if it came down to that.
Right. The Twitch question from Unwary Mike: should I drop DeAndre Hopkins for CEH? I would not. I would definitely keep Hopkins, excuse me, on my roster and let Clyde Edwards-Helaire either be on the waiver wire or have someone else pick him up. Bill Hollywood: I just feel like maybe Mark Andrews, Amari Cooper, and Devontae Adams are about to move teams. That could be the case. I would rank them in the order of most likelihood to be traded. I would rank them Adams, Cooper, and Andrews. I don't think Cooper or Andrews gets traded, but I think Devontae Adams, I could definitely see that happening. And in fact, I think it's more than a 50-50 shot that he's traded, within the next 2 weeks. So, and this brings up an interesting conversation. And I don't know if I have this on the rundown or not. My thoughts on this Devontae Adams trade, Kevin, and I'm sure you've had people asking you too, well, what do I do for fantasy? How do I get ahead of this for fantasy? Well, the only way you can do it is with Raiders players, because you don't know where he's going. He could be a Jet, a Steeler, a Saint, a Knight. Like, he could be any of these. Bill, he could be on any of these teams. I don't like to make reactionary knee-jerk moves to stuff that could happen. However, I will make preparation for stuff I think is going to happen, and that is Devontae Adams no longer being a Raider. And if that's the case, Jacoby Myers you can't pick up. He's rostered everywhere. But Trey Tucker is an interesting guy, Kevin. Mm-hmm. Trey Tucker is a guy that I'll bring up his stats from last week, but he actually had a semi breakout performance. This is a guy that, I was told by several smart high stakes players before the start of the season, watch out for this guy in Tucker this season. This is when they still had Adams. And I look at what he did last week, in week 4. That was last week. In week 4, Trey Tucker ended up going with, I believe he got in the end zone, if I remember correctly. 1 carry, 3 yards, and a touchdown. He also caught 5 balls on 6 targets for 41 yards. 5 catches tied him for the team lead with Jacoby Myers. I ended up starting him on my Scott Fishbowl team for what it's worth. I have him rostered at the back end of my bench. I think that's what you have to do, and just see how this Adams thing plays out, because Trey Tucker could be like a wide receiver 3 or potentially an every week flex play if he keeps getting this kind of target volume, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, he popped towards the end of the season last year too, once Pierce took over a few games, and then he started getting plenty of buzz early in training camp. And even the last two, not even just last week, but the last 2 weeks, he's averaging 19 PPR points per game. So he's one of those guys that more on like some of my like best ball dynasty teams, I made sure, throw him down at the bottom, because I mean, he's got a good, deep skill set for like that specific format. Obviously you don't have to worry about throwing him in your lineup for best ball, but I mean, he's getting to the point now where he's somebody you can throw in a managed leagues as well. So, I mean, I like him. He's probably one of those spike week guys that, 1 week he could get you 20 and then the next week he gets you 3. But I mean, there's worse players out there right now for us to put in our lineups.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I want to talk about your Cleveland Browns here. Your beloved Cleveland Browns. David Njoku comes back to practice yesterday. He then does not practice today. He gets downgraded to DNP. However, as Heath Ledger's Joker would say, it was all part of the plan to keep him out of practice today. Are we going to see Njoku on the field for the Browns this week? And if so, tight end premium format of the FFPC, how skittish would you feel about starting David Njoku his first week back off of injury?
Well, if it's a season-long league, you probably don't have anybody better, so you're probably thrown in there no matter what against the soft Commanders defense, and it's like really like who else do you? I mean, unless you doubled up on tight ends, which I actually did a lot, and which isn't really working out too well for me right now in the season longs. But like really, I mean, with the matchup and everything, I think you got to at this point. I mean, I think like you said, I think that the over under on that's just it's a little low, and it could turn into a lot more than maybe what some people are expecting. So, I mean, you just start them against the Commanders. In the RotoViz passing game matchup tool, Njoku has the second best tight end game set up in that app, and then also like even though he has been better without Deshaun Watson, he still has been bad.
Right.
He averages about four receptions, 30 some yards, a touchdown every 4 games. But I mean, you got to roll with him, especially with the recency bias of what he did at the end of the season. Like he is trending upwards, I guess we should say.
Yeah, I mean, I would start him over, for instance, tonight, Kyle Pitts. I'd play him over Kyle Pitts tonight.
100%.
Evan Engram. I mean, we'll know about his status on Sunday, whether he's playing or not. But I mean, I would start him over Evan Engram. Zach Ertz has been sort of an exciting flavor for fantasy players lately. I'd start him over him. You could honestly make a case to start him over Pat Freiermuth as well. So, I'm on board with if Njoku's active this week, you're playing in a tight end premium format. Probably got to find a way to get him in there. Mile High Luke wants to know on YouTube, do you guys think Audric Estime could be a nice stash to take over the Denver backfield in a couple of weeks? Broncos seem like they want to take the job away from Javonte Williams. I don't necessarily, and by the way, thank you for the question, Luke. I don't think they want to take the job away from Javonte Williams. I just think nobody's going out there and grabbing it, right? McLaughlin has had opportunities. Williams has had opportunities. With that Denver backfield, I think it's also a struggle because the offense is just, quite frankly, not very good. I know several high stakes players I've talked to who told me not to drop Estime, to keep him around because he could be that type of player that comes in and all of a sudden out of nowhere strikes life into that backfield, into that, even if it's a committee thing. Maybe all of a sudden you see him ripping off 12, 14, 15-point games. So I think it's worth keeping him on your roster. I think he could come off IR next week. Don't quote me on that. Maybe he can even come off now. I'm not really sure, but I know he's very, very close. I'm keeping Estime on my roster. I'm going to go out and get him if I have an extra spot. How do you feel about Audric Estime going forward here, Kevin?
I'm pretty much on the same wavelength as you. I mean, he didn't really do much. I know he got 2 carries for 14 yards in that week 1, and he fumbled one of those carries. But at the same time, I mean, okay, so Javonte came on a little bit in the second half of that Jets game, but that's really the first signs of life we've seen from him all season long. And it's almost like I don't think they want to take, like you said, I don't think they want to take that job away from him. But I think that, I mean, he hasn't done anything to keep that job. That's
Right.
for
Yeah.
sure. So I like Estime a lot. I liked him a lot this preseason. I think he's a better back than, obviously he tested pretty poorly at the combine, and that kind of dropped his stock a little bit. But I mean, I like him a lot too, and we all know how Sean Payton is with those running backs. He doesn't care where you came from. He's almost like a Shanahan-esque, McVay-esque. Like, he doesn't care where they come from. He doesn't care that Javonte Williams, has higher draft capital. He's
Right.
going to make running backs out of whomever. So I think that Estime has a very real shot of being a difference maker in that backfield this season for sure.
Upside wins leagues, upside wins championship, upside wins $1 million grand prizes in the FFPC. He's got some upside. Keep him around. You'll know when to cut him. Well, you'll know when to cut him if we tell you on this show and say, okay, the Estime dream is over. Then you can feel free to cut him. Iron Daddy, Zay Jones, Keaton Mitchell, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Odell Beckham, and their impact as they get acclimated in their roles within the next couple of weeks. Do you see any of them possibly having any type of fantasy value or fantasy relevance? Excuse me. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. I think Mitchell is interesting, but I think with the rise of Justice Hill, Mitchell is less intriguing for me. I told you I picked up Clyde Edwards-Helaire in about 1 billion leagues last night, much to my semi-chagrin. So I do think there's something there. Beckham, until Tagovailoa gets healthy, obviously no fantasy relevance. And even when he's healthy, I don't know if he's going to be relevant in that offense with Waddle and Tyreek Hill there. Zay Jones is kind of a wild card. I don't know how I feel about him. I'm definitely not excited. If I had to say, if I had to rank these guys, I would probably put Edwards-Helaire at the top, then Mitchell, then Jones, then Beckham. That's probably how I'd rank them. But as far as fantasy relevance goes, man, you really got to squint to see it with these 4 guys.
Yeah, and just to kind of answer the question and as simply as possible, do you see any of them having possibly any fantasy relevance? No.
Yeah, it's tough, we are going to go through the bye week gauntlet here. We're starting it this week. It's going to be tough to keep guys like this on your roster, especially with injuries and everything. I'd kind of wash my hands of it, but if you have a good enough team and you can take advantage of a couple of empty roster spots, find a spot for preferably the running backs over the receivers.
Yeah.
There's just a much easier path to fantasy relevance with those guys. Todd Archer for ESPN, Kevin, has reported that Cowboys wide receiver Brandin Cooks is not only out for week 5, but could miss multiple weeks with a knee injury. This is interesting because we have already seen Jalen Tolbert come through with a couple of pretty good games this year. And now he is probably going to be the de facto number 2 in that offense, next to CeeDee Lamb. Now, Jake Ferguson is probably going to be the second target getter. I don't think they have a running back that really threatens Tolbert for targets or anything like that. But in an offense that is pass, I'm intrigued by Jalen Tolbert. Maybe not so much this week. I mean, I think he's kind of a desperation flex this week against the Steelers, on the road against the Steelers. But, man, going forward, Tolbert's a very interesting guy to me.
Yeah, and I'd say even Cooks really, beyond week 1, hasn't really done much at all. But Tolbert has popped considerably more. One thing, when I was kind of looking into this a little bit earlier today, I went to our matchup rater tool again that I mentioned earlier, and out of all the matchups, looks like Tolbert's going to be going against Dante Johnson, who is giving up the most PPR points per game amongst the Pittsburgh cornerbacks. So that is something to look at. But at the end of the day, I think it's going to be a lot more volume to CD and some Jake Ferguson. But I mean, I like Tolbert a lot, and I'm just waiting. I really want to see him do it more consistently, because even a couple of years ago when he was coming out, he was a guy that got some buzz and then kind of faded in the background for a year or two. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does with the opportunities that he's going to get now.
I think what's the status I have on Tolbert right now is like, if he gets a touchdown, then yeah, he's probably gonna be starting worthy. But if he doesn't get in the end zone, I mean, 3 for 40 is just not going to cut it, or 4 for 40 or anything like that. So I think you want him on your roster. He might help out in a pinch. And football is a young man's game. Tolbert is much younger than Cooks. I think he is. I would much rather see him getting the volume, the snaps, the targets, the routes than Brandin Cooks at this point in each of their careers. This was interesting from Gerard Mayo this week. Phil Perry had this story. Gerard Mayo said that the Patriots, now take this for what it's worth, they're considering benching Rhamondre Stevenson in favor of former, what is that? Everybody was calling Antonio Gibson the next Christian McCaffrey for like 3 years, and it never happened, obviously. But that would be who is starting in the Patriots backfield instead of Stevenson. I'll read the quote here from Mayo. That's definitely under consideration. We can't preach ball security is job security and still have him out there the majority of the time. Rhamondre Stevenson, 4 games, 4 fumbles, 65 carries, averaging 4.1 yards per carry. But that was taking into account his big week 1. Hasn't come close to touching that since. Antonio Gibson, 5.3 yards per carry, 87 yards on 7 receptions through this past week. And obviously there is a pass catching role there at a minimum for Gibson. I think this is interesting when we look at what we do with Rhamondre Stevenson this week. Do we continue to run him out there? Do we still start him as usual? I mean, I think there's more risk in starting Stevenson this week, even though it's not a bad matchup at home against the Dolphins. I think there's a little bit more risk here in Stevenson.
Yeah, and anytime that ball security comes into question, that's really what'll get you too. And like you said, people are pretty much anchoring to that big week 1 with Rhamondre. He had 21.6 points in that game, but since then it had, like, to put it bluntly, Gibson has been the better back. Like averaging in PPR per game, Gibson's averaging 8.5 to Rhamondre's 9.6, but the snap percentages is Gibson's only getting 30% of the snaps while Rhamondre's getting almost 60. So it's like, and just pretty much across the board, yards after contact. Right now, Gibson's averaging 4.8 and Rhamondre's averaging 2.5 over the last 3 games. So just like across the board, Gibson has just been the better back, to put it bluntly. And I mean, I'm pretty sure Gibson's had his own fumbling issues in the past too.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. It's not like he's super safe when it comes to handling the rock as well. So I think that there's something that could now in New England, maybe he gets a clean slate and he'll get a new opportunity. But this is a situation that bears watching. I personally am still treating Stevenson like, okay, he's worth the risk at this point. I understand he could get benched, but given the running backs you're looking at on a bye week with injuries, RB2 first flex in the FFPC, I think would make a lot of sense for players out there.
Yeah.
Go back to Kansas City here. We talked about the running back situation. Let's talk about the receiver situation. Now, if I got Clyde Edwards-Helaire in most of my leagues last night, JuJu Smith-Schuster had to be a close second because I ended up getting him a lot of spots, which is good. But then I always get nervous. Okay, well, maybe I suck at evaluating talent or bidding. Nothing irritates me more when you bid on a player and you find out there was no secondary bid and you could have gotten him for $1. Irritates me to no end. But Jeremy Fowler had this to say about JuJu Smith-Schuster. He thinks that he's the Chiefs receiver most likely to see a usage boost, end quote, with Rashee Rice, who just got placed on IR today, out at least the next 4 weeks. Now, JuJu Smith-Schuster only has 2 catches for 17 yards on the season, but Fowler thinks he's going to he's going to become a starter. And the Chiefs want to use him in, quote, short and mid-range areas of the field where Rice was doing his damage. Certainly sounds like he is the Rice replacement. This is not his first go around with Kansas City. He played on the Super Bowl roster 2 seasons ago, and Patrick Mahomes obviously is very familiar with him as well. I like this guy as a player that is never going to have the blow up 7 for 130 and 3 touchdowns game anymore in his career, but 4 for 60, 5 for 75 and a touchdown. I mean, these are all within the realm of JuJu Smith-Schuster's fantasy abilities at this point. I know how I feel about him. I picked him up in a bunch of leagues. How do you feel about Smith-Schuster, Kevin?
It was funny because when we were talking on Fantasy Football Report this past week about the first person that was brought up was Justin Watson, because his name has popped a little more for the Chiefs in the last couple of years. But then JuJu Smith-Schuster was brought up, and I was kind of like, ew, gross. But as I was writing the waiver column this week for RotoViz, just starting to look at Rashee Rice's skill set versus JuJu's skill set, like this exact thing is what came to mind. It's just like, Justin Watson's more of a deep threat, high ADOT sort of guy. JuJu's the guy that's going to get all those low volume targets. Like, he's the one that's going to be in that role, like straight up. So, looking back at that in the 2022 season, he wasn't terrible. I mean, he was the wide receiver 27. He's not like he was like he wasn't like not playable. So yeah, I'm right on board with you. I think especially for people that are struggling at receiver going to these bye weeks, JuJu Smith-Schuster does make sense.
I just can't quit him. It's one of those things. Now he's on the Chiefs. You know what I mean? Or he's back on the Chiefs, I should say. This is a situation that I just couldn't get away from. I play in the Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. That's where I primarily play a lot of my leagues. And in that format, you have to start 3 receivers. And anytime you have to start 3 receivers, it's always an arms race in a 12-team league to try to get as many receivers as possible. To me, this is an easy one to pick up off a waiver wire between 100 and 200 blind bidding dollars. Yeah, mark me down for that for sure. Mm-hmm. Let's get into what do I want to do here. Let's do we kind of already talked about the Davante Adams aspect. Let's do the Dolphins here. Yeah, let's do the Dolphins. Tyler Huntley is apparently starting for the Dolphins in Week 5, according to head coach Mike McDaniel, for against the New England Patriots. I said initially that when Tagovailoa went down, you still have to play Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle is kind of a player that depends upon how you put together your roster. Maybe you have the receiver depth and you can bench him. Maybe you don't. I'm of the opinion now, after witnessing that game on Monday night against the Titans, not a great defense, by the way, you can actually bench Tyreek Hill. And I know you never bench your studs, but I could easily see a team, you think about some of the receivers that you might have ahead of Tyreek Hill that you drafted after him that have been awesome this year. Jaden Reed, Mike Evans, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, George Pickens, Brian Thomas. These are all guys you could probably play over Tyreek Hill this week. So you might have the wide receiver depth on your team to sit Tyreek Hill. Now, I don't want to make it seem like he's a must sit, but I don't. If anybody is sitting Tyreek Hill this week after seeing what I saw on Monday, Kevin, I have no problem with it.
Yeah, and when you're drafting him at the top of drafts, top half of the first round, it comes with the context that Tua is going to be his quarterback.
Right.
So when we say our subs, one of our studs, there's a little more that goes into it. Like I say, after Tua's whole situation kind of simmered down last year after he stayed healthy, like, dude, his situation is super scary. Like, I'm afraid to watch him come back on an NFL field, but I mean, that's what he wants to do. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to that from a fantasy aspect. I can't wait to feel good about starting my Dolphins again. But like you said, I'm not, opposed to it. And really the thing is, like, I thought Skylar Thompson, I remember him from a few years back when he had to come in when Tua got his concussions, and he looked pretty awful. Like when they played the Seahawks in Week 3, like, I didn't think he looked as bad as I remembered. So, I mean, at this point, I may almost prefer Tyler Huntley. Like, one little tidbit that I dug up on him when I was doing the waiver article for RotoViz this week was he had more negative expected points added than he did fantasy points last week. I think it was negative 14.3 EPA to like 11.8 fantasy points. So, not good. I mean, we remember him from his Baltimore days, and he has a little bit of rushing, but I mean, you can't feel good about it right now.
Former Pro Bowler Tyler Huntley taking the reins of the Dolphins offense. Speaking of the Dolphins offense, Bill Hollywood asked about this on YouTube. Anything on Mostert? Well, the latest we have is probably the same thing you have. Adam Beasley reporting that Mostert was limited once again in practice today. It sounded like he was fairly close last week. I thought he was going to play with the extra day to get ready on Monday Night Football. That didn't happen, but it sounds like he's going to be good to go for the Dolphins this week against New England. Doesn't mean he should be good to go in your lineups, though. That's my issue with this is If I'm saying that you can sit Tyreek Hill, really, really difficult for me to advocate starting Raheem Mostert. It's kind of a mess right now. And so I'm sitting Mostert, especially coming off this injury. You just don't know how much he's going to be used. I would just advise Bill Hollywood to look elsewhere, Kevin, because I'm not seeing much week 5 fantasy goodness from Mostert.
Yeah. And I mean, Achan's one of my favorite players too. And I mean, I still roll him out in lineups, but man, it's been disappointing. It's been sad. It's been very sad.
Bill Hollywood, Tyler Goodson, I picked up for $1 because never was a big fan of Trey. I'm glad I listened to this because I'm in a couple of those leagues with you, Eric. He actually is. And he might have snaked Trey Sermon from me in a couple of those leagues this past week off of waivers too. So I think Goodson's fine if you have the roster spot. I'm not super excited about him. I mean, he's like a third down guy for Indy at best case scenario. Now he is the guy behind the guy. So if anything were to happen to Sermon, then all of a sudden Goodson's looking very, very good. Let's go to Los Angeles. Packers taking on the Rams this week. Rams will not have Puka Nacua, and now they won't have Cooper Kupp. There are a lot of different flavors in the ice cream bin of Rams receivers this week. Rams pass catchers, I'll say. You have Colby Parkinson at tight end, and then Demarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell. You have Tyler Johnson and Jordan Whittington. When you look at this, Kevin, situation for the Rams, do you have a favorite Rams pass catcher you would deploy against Green Bay this week?
I mean, Tutu's the guy he tied with Whittington for PPR points last week. I think they both had 12.2. And then the first week that both Puka and Cooper Kupp were out, he was also the wide receiver one for them. So, I mean, Tutu is the guy that I would go with. I mean, he is a little more volatile because of his small size and his standing more as like a deep threat. But I mean, he also popped last year a little bit before when Cooper Kupp was out to start the season too. So I mean, we have some sort of a track record of him performing when those big guys are out. And then, I mean, even Whittington, I guess now he was the hype guy this year in the Rams training camp. So it kind of makes sense that he's delivering on that now. I mean, then there's always you always have the sliver of Demarcus Robinson just coming in and just going gangbusters for a game too. Like he does that, right when you feel good about starting somebody, here comes Demarcus Robinson. So, but I mean, Tutu's the guy that I'd go with for sure.
I think he's the guy I go with as well. My co-host for my Friday night show has been telling me Atwell for years, but he's a big Louisville guy, so I can never trust him. Like I have to take it with a grain of salt, but it's good to hear it from you. Atwell, I think, is the guy as well. That said, would not surprise me to see Tutu Atwell go 2 for 20 this week and see Whittington catch 8 balls or Demarcus Robinson, as you said, having a 4 for 135 and a touchdown. It's a little wild. It's a little unpredictable with the Rams right now. If you have to go with somebody, I'm with Kevin. I think it's Atwell, but try to find somebody else. Matt LaFleur said Christian Watson is going to miss at least a week or so for the Packers. Speaking of this Packers-Rams game. And then Romeo Doubs did not practice today. LaFleur is calling it for personal reasons, and they said they're taking it day by day to see whether he's going to be active against the Rams this weekend. Kevin, even more of a reason to fire up the Dontavian Wicks hype train, which still has room for passengers. This is a guy in all the leagues I have. It's tough for me to sit him this week. No Watson and now maybe no Doubs. He had 13 targets last week with both those guys active. I know Watson got hurt right away, but 13 targets is a huge deal in that Packers offense. I love starting Wicks this week.
Yeah, I mean, in last year too, really when we saw Reed and Wicks both kind of take a step forward is when Watson was out, and then if you're taking Doubs out of it on top of that, I mean, Reed doesn't need any help at this point, but Wicks might. And the biggest thing with Wicks, I mean, you're firing him up because Jordan Love has kind of been tooting, been on the diving. I guess the biggest thing is Jordan Love is on the Dontavian Wicks train, so we should all jump on too.
Yes, yeah. If the quarterback's the engineer, then we need to get on that train.
Yeah, and I say there's multiple. I wrote up a big thing on the Green Bay passing offense this offseason. Blair has been, did a bunch of advanced stat stuff on that, and we're just as a site, I guess. RotoViz is very much in on Dontavian Wicks, and it was kind of rough to see him start the season the way that he did, but I mean, he has been kind of inching forward, and since then, I think he had 3 targets and no receptions in week 1, and since then he's kind of been getting a little better. So, I mean, yeah, fire him up. I don't think you can really afford to not fire him up this week.
Yeah, you got to get him active for sure. And again, the Dobbs could still be active this week. In fact, he probably will be, but we'll see. Even then, I think even still, you got to get Wicks out there. I feel like a broken record at this point, but I said his second to last year of college, he crushed it. If he would have come out that year, might have been a late first round pick, for sure a second round pick. Then, all that stuff happened with obviously the shooting of his teammates there. You had a new coach come in, new offensive coordinator. He was dealing with some injuries. He falls to the 5th round the following year, and the Packers snag him. And the talent is there. I mean, you can see the talent is there. And we'll see what happens with him the rest of the way. We are way late for a break. Let's step out, catch our breath. When we come back, it's our Thursday night football preview. Falcons, Buccaneers. We'll take your fantasy questions. Talk about the Buccaneers receivers. Talk about the running backs, actually, more importantly. Baker Mayfield, how good of a start is he this week? Do you have to bench Kyle Pitts? Can Kirk Cousins be started this week? If you are in bye-week hell, trying to figure out what quarterback to start, those questions answered and more. He's Kevin Szafraniec from RotoViz. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, Better Sports Network. It's Fantasy Football Night in America. Don't go anywhere.
We're telling ourselves happy stories about players we want to pick, less happy stories about players we don't want to pick. And part of that is being ready to abandon our own carefully crafted narratives when it's time to abandon them, right? Like, bail, this was not working, So like we come in with super hard opinions, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. The better fantasy players are the people who acknowledge quickly that, hey, this isn't working out. Doesn't mean you have to abandon a player, but it means you have to abandon the approach, and maybe you have to go with a different player. I mean, if people were playing Stephon Diggs last year down the stretch, they were only playing him because his name is Stephon Diggs. You have to be ready to acknowledge, hey, this guy's not getting the job done. I did it. Bloom and I had a big discussion about this last December, and I'm saying you can't play him right now, right? And I know that's a hard decision to make, because why? FOMO. We're going to miss out on that big game. The minute I sit this guy down, he's going to have the big game. Well, maybe. But also, while he is not having great games, there are other guys on your roster having great games. And I think that's to me, the hardest thing about fantasy is like, when do I divorce myself from my narrative? When do I tell when do I acknowledge my happy story is not coming true? I need to figure something else out. And the people who are good at that are the people who are good at fantasy football.
18 minutes until the top of the hour. You are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He is Kevin Szafraniec from RotoViz. Of course, rotoviz.com. Check out the fantasy football report that he co-hosts with Blair Andrews. That's every week, right? Right, Kevin? That comes out every week?
Yep, every Sunday night at 9 p.m. And then Blair and I also have started a waiver show that we're doing at 9:15 on Tuesdays. That it's all live streaming, live Q&A. So we try to dip out right before you jump on.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Kevin, we got Thursday night football tonight. It is one that I have I don't want to say high hopes for, but maybe higher than normal hopes for, with the Falcons and the Buccaneers getting it on. It is a NFC South showdown for divisional supremacy. The home team, Atlanta, 2-2 on the season. Tampa is already off to a 3-1 start, and the total in this game is 44. Now, the Buccaneers is who I want to talk about first. Baker Mayfield has looked awesome so far this year, and what's problematic about that for fantasy owners is not a lot of people drafted Baker Mayfield as a starting quarterback. They drafted him as a backup. The issue is he's probably been performing better than a lot of the starters that he might have been drafted behind, in backup. So I want to go through this list. You tell me if you would rather play this guy or Mayfield this week for quarterbacks, because I think this could be very compelling. Okay, let's start off with Baker Mayfield. That's a too tough a one. Let's do
You need some softballs here to start.
Okay, yeah, we'll do some softballs to start. Okay, Baker Mayfield at on the road at Atlanta, or Sam Darnold at home against the Jets?
At home in London, right?
Oh yeah, in London. Sorry, yeah, Sunday morning in London.
Yeah. That's. I don't know if how big of a softball that.
Not a softball. Okay.
No, but that's two tough defenses. I know this is probably supposed to be rapid fire, but off the top, I'm going to say Baker. But
I would agree with you.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that. Mayfield or Trevor Lawrence at home against the Colts?
Mayfield.
I agree.
Yeah.
Mayfield or Prescott at Pittsburgh?
I'd go Dak on that one.
I would still go Mayfield. The Steelers, I mean, that Steelers defense
Yeah.
just, God, it's just, I'm watching it and I want to pull my hair out because I don't know how they do it. And yet they do it every single week with not allowing a lot of third down conversions. They've been so good with keeping teams under 20 points, usually, not always. Okay, so Baker Mayfield. Now this might be an easy one. Baker Mayfield tonight or Anthony Richardson Sunday, currently getting in 2 limited practices at Jacksonville. We don't officially know if he's playing.
Yeah, I think we got to go with Baker still.
Yes.
I mean, the biggest thing is like that. Before we kind of go forward, is this Atlanta secondary is one of like the quietly, like, I don't know, or maybe not so quietly, like best in the league. I mean, you got AJ Terrell and Mike Hughes, Justin Simmons, Jesse Bates. Like that's where we're, kind of like my trepidation, or we're really like thinking like, how good is he going to be against these guys tonight? And I think it's just maybe flying a little bit under the radar. Everybody just wants to say, the Falcons have not been good. The Buccaneers have been good. So we just want to just, hammer home the Buccaneers tonight. And it's like, it could be a little rougher sledding than maybe we're letting on.
I don't know, but I do know that if they are not the most expensive secondary in the NFL, they got to be close to the most expensive secondary in the NFL. Atlanta paid through the teeth for it, and they're getting results. I'm going with Mayfield there as well. Now here, let's do two more, and then I get the ultimate one for you at the end. Baker Mayfield or Geno Smith at home against the Giants?
Oh, Geno's one of my favorites this year.
I agree. Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray at San Francisco?
I might go Baker on that one. San Francisco isn't what they used to be, but their defense anyways. But I might go Baker on that one. Kyler's been not great.
It's one of those things that's like, who is going to get off the struggle bus this week? Is it going to be the Niners defense or is it going to be Kyler Murray? Now, the total on that game is 50, which to me suggests it's probably going to be Kyler Murray. It's also a positive game script for him because they are 7.5-point dogs. So he should be passing. Plus you add the rushing aspect in, which I know he hasn't been doing a ton. And he was limping quite a bit last game too. That was the other thing that was a little unsettling. I am going to lean towards Kyler Murray here. Here's an interesting one. I'm not going to say anything till you weigh in on this. Baker Mayfield or on Monday Night Football at home at Arrowhead, Patrick Mahomes against the Saints?
I still got to go with Mahomes.
I say this all the time, Kevin. I am a weak man. Okay, I am not strong enough to play Baker Mayfield over Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes could have me and you on the perimeter catching passes from him. I still probably lean Mahomes because he's still healthy in his legs, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's Mahomes there. Although it has been unfortunate with what we've seen from the Chiefs so far this season. I was saying I got a local fantasy football show here in Northeast Wisconsin, and I was saying on it this afternoon. It just doesn't seem like the Chiefs care about football until November, and then they go on this big run, and yet they're 4-0 right now. It's like I don't know if it's smoke and mirrors. I don't know if it's they're so good they can go through the motions and get wins. I don't know. But I'm with you. I think it's Mahomes over Mayfield here. Now, here's an interesting one. What about the Tampa Bay backfield? Bucky Irving, who has been eating into Rachaad White's touches and who's been more efficient with them. Rachaad White, who was notoriously inefficient last year, he was a volume guy. He was an aggregator, or an accumulator, which I never liked. Bucky Irving or Rachaad White. Let's say you drafted White and then you got Irving as just a handcuff later on in the draft. Now you have both of them. Now you have a real decision to make. At Atlanta tonight, you're only playing one of these Buccaneers running backs. Who's it going to be?
I don't think you can feed into the sunken cost fallacy too much. So I think, you got to go Bucky at this point. He's been the better rusher all year long. They're currently in rush attempts. I think they're pretty much neck and neck as far as the season goes. Last week, I do believe Rachaad White had 3 targets to Bucky's 2. And on top of that, Bucky's doubling up Rachaad White in yards before contact and yards after contact. So, like, I mean, I don't really think this is much of a question when you look at the numbers. But when you look at the draft board from this year, you're still going to probably want to roll with Rachaad White because, I paid a third, fourth round pick for this guy. Like, but it just don't. It's one of those things. Just don't fall into those traps of sunken cost fallacy.
What about? I want to get back to the YouTube question here from Mile High Luke. Would you? From Robert Gilroy. Excuse me. I'll do that one first. Cade Otton, who plays tonight, or George Kittle? And you say, obviously it's Kittle. Well, bear in mind that Otton plays tonight, and Kittle was not spotted at practice today, according to Matt Barrows, who he covers the Niners. I can't remember for who. The B or something. I don't know what it is out there. But Kittle and Fred Warner had full gear on a side field. So after the media left, maybe they each got in a limited session. Kittle did not practice yesterday. And if you have to make a decision between those two players this week, it's tough. I still lean towards Kittle. Maybe you can get in a waiver claim and pick up some other tight end in case Kittle can't go. But I still think you lean Kittle here, right?
Yeah. When I was, putting together my weekly lineup, just kind of doing some research for the show, Kittle was my lean of like, who do I want to start at tight end? But then I went into our passing matchup rater, and his matchup in that app is not very good, surprising to me. So, and I do know that Otton in the last 2 weeks, he's had 8 and 9 targets in each of those games. So especially if you're in a tight end premium, I don't think it's as clear cut as we would like. I mean, obviously our heart is always going to tell us to go Kittle because he's George Kittle.
Right, exactly. and the other thing with Kittle, and I've noticed this over the last couple of years, man, when he runs pure, he runs really pure, and he might single-handedly win your week for you. But then there's these other games where it's like 2 for 10 or 3 for 17. He just runs so hot and cold. And this could be a cold week. I mean, you never know these things. So I think it's Kittle. If you can find a way to pick up another tight end, do so. If literally you cannot and there's nobody else out there, then I'd probably take the guaranteed points or hopefully guaranteed points with Otton tonight. But I think that scenario is hopefully rare for everybody. I want to get back to this before I forget about it. Mile High Luke, Justin Fields over Kyler Murray this week. I would do that. Justin Fields is playing Dallas this week. I would play Fields over Murray. Kevin, how do you feel about it?
I'm with you on that. I do believe Micah Parsons did suffer a high ankle sprain, I do believe as well. And that Dallas defense is not, and
DeMarcus Lawrence too, right?
Yeah.
Is going to be missing a lot of time. So that's huge.
And that defense is not what it was the past couple of years when they were like defense special team 1 in fantasy. So yeah, I'd say Fields pretty much I don't think it's too big of a debate. I think Kyler is the bigger name, obviously, and most people would instantaneously go, oh yeah, I'm going to start Kyler, but I mean he just has not been looking that great this year. And and Fields, not to say Fields looks great. He still fumbles a lot. I think he had 2 fumbles this past game, but he's been doing enough to get the Steelers to 3-1, and I think he's QB6 on the year at this point too. So, and I think one of the biggest things is he has not really been doing it on the back of rushing. I think he's only averaging about 36 to 40-ish yards rushing per game so far. We all know that he has more in him than that. So it's not even say he's hitting his ceiling as the QB6 so far this year. So I think Fields is the way to go.
Lex Plant Some Trees on YouTube. Would you drop Darnell Mooney for Trey Tucker? I couldn't do it. I would rather have Mooney on my team rather than Tucker. How do you feel, Kevin?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat because he's pretty much that clear wide receiver 2 or just receiver 2. We always wanted Pitts to be the receiver 2, but he's not. And I think he only scored 2.5 PPR points in week 1, but since then he's up around 14 points per game. So I don't think we can expect that sort of consistency from Trey Tucker.
Yeah, consistency is a big thing too when it comes to these managed leagues where you have to submit lineups each and every week. What about Lex Plant Some Trees? Your first question was so great. We'll give you another one. Bucky Irving or Devin Singletary this week? Devin Singletary at Seattle. Total on that one's 43.5. They are 6.5-point dogs. And obviously Bucky Irving is tonight against the Falcons, where they are 2.5-point dogs, total of 44. Singletary has been getting in limited practices so far this week. I think he's trending in the right direction. That said, it's not something I want to risk when I have somebody like Bucky Irving. I'll take Irving tonight to see what he can do against Atlanta and sit Singletary. There's a chance he might not play this week.
Yeah, just so this is so close. I just kind of jumped over to our strength of streaming app on RotoViz, and it does have the Giants as a better matchup than Tampa Bay. But I mean, yeah, I mean that's really a rough one. And like when it's such a close toss up, that's when I kind of like go to the data, and when I can't really figure it out one of the way. That's why I definitely go to like something like the strength of streaming app to like try to break the tie, or some rankings for someone that I really trust.
And it makes perfect sense. I mean, I think you're splitting hairs here. I think both of these guys, if Singletary plays, I could easily see him having a better week than Irving tonight. Given that a lot can happen until Sunday, I'll play Irving tonight. But if you want to play Singletary, I have no problem with that. Sterling Shepard, is he a desperation flex? I mean, is there anything here with no Jalen McMillan tonight? We've seen Jalen McMillan score a few touchdowns this year. Is there something with Shepard that we can put out there tonight and hope for the best, or is he better left on our bench or on the waiver wire?
I think desperation is the key word there. Depending on the level of desperation. Because I did bring up, the secondary for Atlanta, and like you said, they're very highly paid. But if there's any weak link in it, it'd be D. Alford of the nickel, and that's who Shepard would most likely be going up against. And say last week he had 5 targets, 3 receptions for 60 yards, and that was with Palmer in the lineup and without really dealing with Palmer tonight. I do believe he's been ruled out. But yeah, I think desperation is the key, and if you really don't have anything else going for you, that's probably, I guess it's
you should retire from fantasy football. You gotta find something better. You have to.
We try to,
Coop Eagle, would you start Bucky or White? We just talked about that. We both actually said Bucky, Irving, Coop. So good luck with that. Who is watching us on Twitch tonight? I will bring this up as well as we are talking Buccaneers and Falcons on Thursday Night Football tonight. There's no injury here. Mark Andrews or Cade Otton. Andrews, who's fallen off the face of the planet in fantasy this year, in favor of Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers, or in Justice Hill on that offense. Would you play Cade Otton over Mark Andrews this week?
As weird as it is, I would say yes.
Wow.
Isn't that wild?
It's crazy, but I mean, the craziest part is like, you know me, I'm a weak man. I couldn't do it, but I can't disagree with it. I can't disagree with the logic. Otton is seeing the targets. Andrews is not right now. And whether that's a Ravens thing, whether that's an Andrews thing, I don't know, but I don't care for fantasy. Like, give me the guy who is getting the volume, and that's Otton right now. So I can definitely get behind it.
Yeah, and we don't even, I mean, at first, right after Likely's first big game of the year against the Chiefs, I wrote it up and said, Likely's probably the third highest target getter in that offense going forward. But like even now, I mean, I don't know. He might be the tight end one, as weird as it is to say. It's not like Andrews is over the hill. So unless it's like that car crash that he got into in training camp, is just he has some lingering thing towards that. Like it's just inexplicable what's going on there. So, but hey, when you're jumping out to 20-point leads in the first quarter, who cares, right? Like, hey, we just run with Derrick Henry 30 times.
Yeah, whatever works. And if it's working, then if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I asked you a Sam Darnold question before in regards to Baker Mayfield. What about Kirk Cousins or Sam Darnold? Would you play Cousins tonight against that Buccaneers defense at home, or would you rather play Sam Darnold, who is in London against it's a revenge game. I just realized that the Sam Darnold revenge game against the Jets in London.
So that's just, I mean, I don't want to cop out and say the rest of the season I would take Darnold, obviously. Because in my waivers column this week, I did say that Cousins was droppable. So, geez, you know what? I'm gonna get wild and say Sam Darnold over Kirk Cousins right now.
I don't think it's that wild. I would probably agree with you based on the level of play I've seen from Cousins and the Falcons offense so far. It is close. But yeah, I mean, let's get nuts. Let's make Sunday morning interesting again. Sam Darnold, forget church. We're all staying home and watching Sam Darnold light up the fighting Aaron Rodgers in London. What a great Sunday it's going to be. Moving on, Tyler Algier. Now, I should have asked you this at the top of the show. Which backfield are you more concerned about if you have Bijan Robinson or Breece Hall? Is it the Falcons backfield split or is it the Jets backfield split right now?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that is so hard because I love all those guys, and I especially love Braylon Allen as well. I'm a big Braylon Allen guy.
I got my Bucky sweatshirt, Bucky Badgers on tonight for Braylon Allen.
Oh, geez. I think I'm more worried about the Falcons backfield, specifically Bijan, just because, I mean, Tyler Algier has just looked like the better running back. And I think just that offense as a whole just does not look good. Where we can kind of tell ourselves a story about the Jets this past week, like, weather and blah, 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 good defense they're playing against. So I say right now I'm more worried about the Atlanta defense or the Atlanta backfield. Split, yeah. Unfortunately, yeah.
Now, Bijan Robinson had 4 catches, 46 yards. Algier 2 for 20 last week. But you look at the rushing attempts. Algier had 8. Bijan Robinson had 7. Algier got 60 yards on his with a long of 15. It's not like he busted off a 40-yarder. Bijan Robinson 7 for 28. I think you're probably right because we heard last year too that it might be a split between Algier and Bijan Robinson. So this is something that's been boiling. I think you're right. That said, what if you have Algier in a league? Would you flex him out this week against Tampa, knowing you got to make a choice on it tonight because he plays tonight? How do you feel about Tyler Algier's chances for a good game, not even a big game, but a good game against the Buccaneers in Atlanta?
I feel pretty good, honestly. It's like I say, obviously it all depends on team context. If I have somebody that I feel a little more comfortable with, if I have any basically wide receiver that I feel comfortable with, it doesn't seem like much has changed just in Atlanta, even after the change in coaching staff. It's like, feels like we're watching the same team we watched last year, and it's kind of like maddening.
It is.
So, I mean, Algier's a fine start in that second flex because, I mean, obviously you got to go with him while he's actually looking like it's Bijan who's looking like he's underwhelming and not living up to his thing. Like Algier's doing what he's always done. So we know what Algier can do too. So I don't have any problem throwing him in a flex.
What about this from NK on YouTube? A time-sensitive question. Should he start Bucky Irving or pick up Tyler Algier real quick and start him? He does have Joe Mixon, but he's not confident he plays this week after he hasn't practiced Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not confident in it as well. So this comes down to the 2 running backs for tonight, the 2 backup running backs for tonight. Bucky Irving or Tyler Algier, who are you playing?
I still like Bucky. Bucky's my guy, so I got to go with him.
Yeah, I'm with you on this, actually. I think I look at those 2 backfields. I see 4 competent running backs. 3 of them are playing very well right now, and that's Irving, that's Algier, and that's Robinson. White is not at that level, at least playing up to his potential. So I'd rather start Irving over Algier at this point because I do believe that the Falcons' backfield might be a true split, whereas we might see a significant switch tonight with Irving. Darnell Mooney, is he a must flex this week? He's had his share. He's had a couple of good games so far this year, a couple of clunkers as well. I like the matchup tonight. I think in all the leagues I have Mooney in, I might be setting him in 1. So I obviously like him quite a bit this week, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I just have to look at as far as the way I draft, I generally have so many wide receivers that
it's tough to get Mooney in when you have wide receiver 5 or 6 for you. Yeah, I get it.
But like I said, in the last 3 games, he's averaging 13.7 PPR points. So and that's one of the things is like somebody who owns a significant amount of Kyle Pitts in, dynasty and in redraft. Watching Cousins repeatedly throw to Mooney over and over and over again over the last few games has been a little bit rough. So I'm very well aware of exactly how many targets that Mooney is getting in these last few weeks. So as must flex, I mean, for someone like me, probably not, but I mean, you can't really argue with the numbers.
Speaking of arguing with the numbers, Mile High Luke, what do you think about this? Tyler Algier over 40 rushing yards, Drake London anytime touchdown, and 70+ yards receiving over Rachaad White receiving yards. You had me until Rachaad White receiving yards. I think I could get on board with the rest of it. But what do you think about that for Mile High Luke for his action tonight?
So I mean, right now I'm waiting for Godwin to take a step back. Honestly, he's playing really, really well. I mean, and that's more of a gut thing more than anything based on the numbers. I actually wrote him up in our advanced stats article today, and he's kind of like reverting to his like 2021 numbers, which is pretty wild. And so that's 100% like a gut thing based on no data whatsoever. I need to put that disclaimer in there. And honestly, like I feel like if anything, like Rachaad White I don't think they're going to dump him to this point. And I feel like he's still going to get quite a few targets, and anything if he gets less rushing attempts, kind of like what we're expecting, that maybe they'll up him in the receiving game. So I actually feel kind of okay about the 25 yards receiving for Rachaad White tonight.
Okay. Let's finish it up with this. Mile High Luke, RIP Kyle Pitts. Really hope they start him a little better, but the hope is dying. Is it too early to call him a draft bust, an NFL draft bust? Is it too early to say that, Kevin, or can we have we seen enough?
Oh no, I mean, I don't know. It's not too early to call him a 2024 fantasy football draft bust. I can tell you that.
Right.
But I mean, I really feel like there's going to be some sort of trade on the horizon for him. I mean, it's either if he is such a bust, I wouldn't be surprised if they try to move him while he has name value, and some team will like basically say, oh, we can fix him, like you're not using him right, and then they'll get something back. So that's really what I'm waiting for, because like even this year, I mean, Kansas City got lit up in the first 2 weeks by the tight ends, one Isaiah Likely, then the second week by like Mike Gesicki of all people.
Yeah, Gesicki, that's right.
So like, and then Atlanta went there in week 3 and he put up a dud, and then even last week against New Orleans, that was another good tight end matchup, and he put up another dud. So I mean, I think we have one season that says Pitts is good, and then 2.25 that say he's not. So I mean, right now we got to go with the recency and the quantity, I think, which is, it's sad to say, because talking about sunken cost fallacy, I made some pretty wild dynasty trades to get Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, I get it. Like, the talent is there. Bet on the talent. It's just at this point, it's tough, man. I want to get to Chris Archer has been very patient here. Chris Archer, pick 2 to start here. T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, Wan'Dale Robinson. I'm playing Higgins and Cooper over Robinson, who is dealing with a heel injury right now. I think he plays, but I like Higgins and Cooper better this week.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, especially Cooper. I mean, that Commanders defense is pretty amazingly bad, or pretty amazing for people playing against them. So I'm 100% with you, but I do think Wan'Dale is a better start if Neighbors plays than if he doesn't. So I think Neighbors opens up a lot in that offense for him, where Wan'Dale's not the guy that you want as your wide receiver 1 on your NFL offense. So
I like that people have nicknamed Wan'Dale Robinson the scam or the scheme, right? Because that's what he is. He's a PPR Ponzi scheme. Makes no sense. Like, he catches 15 balls every week for 20 yards. And hey, more power to him. It still counts. The other one that Chris Archer had, Jerome Ford or Kareem Hunt this week. Jerome Ford is at Washington, and Kareem Hunt is at home against the Saints. I don't think Chubb plays, so I'm on board with Ford over Hunt this week.
Yeah, and the same. I think there's going to be a lot of plays. I mean, the Browns run the most plays out of any team in the NFL, and then that's probably going to just be a fun game to watch, where a lot of back and forth, a lot of offense. So yeah, I'd 100% go with Ford, especially with the uncertainty in the Kansas City right now.
I can 100% guarantee you that after this break, we are going to put together an FFPC Weekly Challenge lineup. Myself and Kevin Szafraniec will put together a hopefully winning lineup for you for the Weekly Challenge. That is coming up next. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. We're just 6 minutes away from live football. We'll tell you everything that's going on in that game as well, taking you all the way up to the 9 o'clock hour. This is the Better Sports Network.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, and they let him be the quarterback for a long time too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl.
And
when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game.
Yeah.
That they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yard go.
We have entered hour number 2 of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network for Thursday, October 3rd, 2024. We're talking FFPC Weekly Challenge. It is me, Eric Balkman from the FFPC, and it is Kevin Szafraniec from RotoViz.com, the Fantasy Football Report, and the Waiver Show on Tuesday nights as well. Check that out at RotoViz.com and the RotoViz radio channel on YouTube. Play the FFPC Weekly Challenge as well. Matt Deutsch, our producer, has the QR code on the front of the screen. Scan that. It'll take you right to myffpc.com, and you can play the Weekly Challenge, the contest we are about to put together a lineup exclusively for our viewers tonight. This is the kind of stuff we do for you because we love you so much. There's no draft. There's no salary cap. You pick whatever players you want. 10 of them with no kickers and defenses, or 12 of them with kickers and defenses. 1 player per NFL team. There is no stacking. $35 or $200 to enter. You can win up to $2,500. myffpc.com, myffpc.com, or simply scan that QR code and register now. So, Kevin, we are going to put together a weekly challenge lineup. We talked about this before the show. You have already put one together. And I think what's interesting about that is you had to start somewhere to try to assemble this. There's a lot of different ways to do this. How did you approach putting this lineup together?
We'll pretty much start at the top with quarterback, and then I just pulled up our strength of schedule app and passing rate matcher, or passing matchup rater tool on RotoViz. And really at the top, it was a thing like between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And then really it's just trying to figure out, okay, like how it's really a game script thing of like, how do we see this Bengals Baltimore game going? And like through that, I said, well, you know, Cincinnati, I don't know if they're going to be able to like keep up with them. So I could see the Ravens jumping out to one of these big leads again. So I figured, all right, well, let's just go roll with Josh Allen at the top. Just get our our elite quarterback in there. I think the passing game there in Buffalo's picking up as well, and we all know that he can run. So I said, let's just roll with that against Houston.
Now, when you were deciding between Allen and Jackson, is that typically where you go and submitting a lineup? Like, this is the same format as our world famous FFPC playoff challenge. Is that typically where you like to start? Is that the quarterback position, figure out the quarterback, and then figure out everybody else?
No, not really. I just kind of have a crapshoot. Really, I just start where I'm feeling. Just all strictly vibes based. Like where are we feeling today, man? Just depends on where we're at.
I always bring this up with whenever we put these lineups together on the show. I always like looking at the high total games, whatever Vegas is saying, 48, 49, 50, 50 plus.
Mm-hmm.
And then I try to take a couple of players from that. But you're going with Josh Allen at quarterback, which makes perfect sense. In the matchup this week for the Bills, they are taking on the Houston Texans, and that is in Houston, and that is a total featuring 47.5. So, and you love that. You love the legs of Allen. You love the arm of Allen. No further discussion on that needed. Where are we going next? Are we going running back? Are we going receiver, tight end? Where would you like to go?
I think running back's the most interesting, where there's a lot of different people you can talk to. But so just because I didn't take Lamar, I'm kind of game script dependent. Kind of looking at Derrick Henry to have another one of those games where it's a Derrick Henry game. Like his production has been super, game script dependent as far as like the first two games, not a whole lot going on, but these last two games when the Ravens have jumped out the big leads, like he's averaging 33 points a game. So they're going to feed him when they're ahead. That's what they got him for. And I think that we could see that again this week. Because, even like last year, the Ravens did that plenty. So,
yeah. 209 total yards and 2 touchdowns for Derrick Henry this past week. So you love that kind of production. Makes perfect sense with having Derrick Henry in there. How many other running backs did you choose?
Well, 2 maybe. And then I have the last couple flexes. I figured we were going to talk through.
Okay, we'll put those together.
You and I.
That's perfect. So what other running backs do you have on this roster right now?
So right now I have Najee Harris for the reasons that we kind of talked about earlier, starting him even with Justin Fields, like the Dallas defenses and what they are, and nobody else is healthy in that backfield. He's probably going to get as much work as he can handle. And then Kyren Williams versus Green Bay in one of the flexes. So let's say that's just a good matchup, high point total. And you can't really go wrong with Kyren at this point either. He's going to get a ton of work as well, especially even with the lack of passing offense. He is kind of the engine of that whole entire offense, and there's not really much else.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like if you're going to pick a Ram, who else would it be? And why wouldn't you pick the guy that they run the offense through? What's the total on that? That's got to be mid 40s, right? I would imagine.
Higher. I thought it was like 40, 48.
Oh, 49. It's up to 49 now. Yeah, you're right. 49 is what it's. Yeah, so that makes perfect sense. And an implied total, I believe, is what the kids say, of like 22, 23 points. So you got to love that. You also have to love, if you are a fan of Kyle Pitts, he just had a massive play in the Thursday night game. The very first play from scrimmage, you have Kyle Pitts. I take that back. The second play from scrimmage, Kirk Cousins hits Kyle Pitts for a 32-yard pass completion, and the Falcons are now in business inside the Buccaneers 40, as the game is not even a minute old, and Kyle Pitts already has 4.7 FFPC tight end premium points. Unbelievable stuff. Okay, we got a running back squared away for now. Henry, Harris, Williams. What are we doing at wide receiver here, Kev?
Jumping to the other side of that, the Green Bay Rams game with Jaden Reed. He's the guy. Obviously we talked about Wicks a little bit, but I don't think there's any question. If you have Reed or Wicks, I'm starting Reed 100% of the time. On our strength of schedule app on RotoViz, he has the best matchup. I guess the Green Bay Packers have the best matchup as a team across the whole entire slate for week 5. So I think that's kind of a no-brainer. He's just too good right now. Even with the 2 down weeks with Malik Willis, he's still the PPR wide receiver 4 this year. And he's just awesome. He's one of those players that is just so fun to watch. I have fun clicking his name, putting him in a lineup. So he's there.
There was an article on acmepackingcompany.com about Jaden Reed this week, where Reed is actually second in the league in yards from scrimmage with 427 behind Nico Collins. Good guy to be behind, by the way. Reed is averaging, like, if you look at his, what was this? NFL Pro? NFL Pro, pro.nfl.com. Reed has been the most effective slot receiver in the NFL so far this year, which is all. I mean, people are talking about, like, who's the Packers' number one receiver? Who's the number one receiver? I think unequivocally it's Reed, and you can make the argument that he's more important in that offense than anyone else not named Jordan Love, including Josh Jacobs. So he's been unbelievable this year. They're utilizing him from all three facets of the game, right? Running the ball, catching the ball, and then using him as a decoy to get other people involved too. It's been tremendous so far. So I'm totally on board with Jaden Reed. Who's the other receiver we got?
A hometown guy that I generally don't click on, but Amari Cooper. I think you just got to start him this week against that Commanders defense. I mean, it's going to be fun watching that game. There's not very many Browns games that I say it's going to be fun to watch, but I think this may be one of them. So I think he's just going to have a big game. Torch him. We've seen, we see Malik Neighbors was, like, I think the wide receiver 3 in week 2 versus them. And then we had Chase was the wide receiver 3 the week after. I think Mike Evans was the wide receiver 6 in week 1. And I think it wasn't until last week where Marvin Harrison I think he was like a low end wide receiver 2, where we actually saw them stop anyone. So
right.
I'm just ready for
So, like, I don't want to say Cooper has been bad this year, because he hasn't been bad. But I will say, as we have a touchdown in the Thursday night game, it is Kirk Cousins to Drake London for 6. Drake London getting in the end zone. So congratulations, Mile High Luke, on that Drake London anytime touchdown. You are well on your way to getting 70-plus receiving yards as well. 18 yards from Kirk Cousins to Drake London, 6-0 with the extra point from Hyungwoo Koo pending. See, Mile High Luke already put the anytime touchdown in there. Yes. Congratulations. We're all living vicariously through you, at least until this show is over. So the thing with Cooper, what has he got on the season? 16 catches, only 148 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. That's good. Would you say there's been something, quote unquote, wrong with him this year?
To start the season, yeah. I mean, the Browns run the most routes. They run the most plays of any offense, and he was getting the volume, but he wasn't converting any of them. Every week I write up our advanced stats article, and he was continuously like the top receiver in air yards, but just like one of the lowest in converting like any of the air yards. So, I mean, he's always been the boomer bust, but he's been extra bust to begin. But then even, he still has those like amazing catches. I mean, in the one game against, I can't remember who it was in week 3. I mean, he had like multiple like really tough sideline catches, and he still looks like the same guy. It's just sometimes he just fades away. So I think Amari Cooper is getting a little older, but he's still like Amari Cooper. He's still like this week. I think he's going to have a huge game, but then, he could go for 2 for 20 the week after,
That was the Giants game, right? In week 3.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we got Reed, we got Cooper. Do we have a tight end here? Oh, actually, before we talk about that, do you have any receivers as flexes?
Well, that's what I was going to talk to you as we roll down.
That out. Do we have a tight end already on the roster?
Yeah, it feels kind of weird, but I mean, Kelsey is who I went with here against a weak New Orleans defense.
A shockingly non-chalky play with Travis Kelsey, right? Because of what's been happening in Kansas City so far this year. And maybe he'll be chalked this week, with no Hollywood Brown, no Rashee Rice, no Isaiah Pacheco. Maybe everyone be like, well, they got to move the ball somehow. And I think Kelsey had 7 for 89 last week. So there is something to be said for that. But again, when in the weekly challenge, you can play in a 10-team league or a 30-team league or a 100-team. Like, you're not beating out thousands of other people for this. You just got to beat out some. And not every pick has to be this explosive, unbelievable league winner. So that is the roster as it stands now. You and I are going to add the final 3, right? 3. We're playing with 10, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The final 3 flexes. Right now we have Josh Allen, Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, Kyron Williams. Those are the 4 guys in the backfield. Jaden Reed, Amari Cooper, Travis Kelsey are the perimeter players, pass catchers. We can go a lot of different places here with the flexes. I'm open to anything. I can guide you in what I'm thinking here, but you let me know what you're thinking for these final 3 spots, Kevin.
Well, the one definitive guy that I actually had and didn't have anybody else was Marvin Harrison Jr. But I don't feel great about it, honestly. I mean, I just feel like that'll be a good game. And like you said, the Cardinals could be coming from behind against San Francisco. So, I mean, it's a good-ish matchup, but I don't feel great about throwing Marvin Harrison in there. But he's the guy, who I have in the second flex. I don't know if you have any objections to that.
I'm fine with throwing him in. I mean, that's a total of 50. It's a positive game script for Marvin Harrison as well. And I think like the bugaboo is it's the Niners defense, but it's not the capital letters Niners defense. Yes. So I'm totally fine with Marvin Harrison here for sure. And that was I was going to ask you, like, we got to get somebody in that game. I was going to say Jordan Mason, but we can, since it's Harrison, we could still get Jordan Mason on this team too.
Yeah, I'm gonna say hello, Mr. Segway, because the next so Debo and Kittle do not have the best matchups, but like they're Debo and Kittle. But then the third one was Jordan Mason. So like I'm 100% okay with throwing Jordan Mason in as far as one of our 49ers. Because like I said, Debo and Kittle don't have the best matchup, but at the same time, the 49ers aren't our average offense where they have so many different options to beat you that like I really don't take terrible matchups into as much consideration as I would with somebody that only has like one or two, good playmakers on their offense. So let me say we could do Jordan Mason as our next flex.
So that leaves us with one flex left, right? Let me throw, I think I'm counting, right? We got 9 players. Yeah, we got 9 players. Okay. Here's some of the other options I'm going to throw out there. You let me know what you think. Jamar Chase on Cincinnati, I think would be interesting. If you really wanted to go outside the box, we could do Zach Moss or Chase Brown there. If you look at that Buffalo-Houston game, we don't have a Houston player. We could go with Diggs. We could go with Nico Collins there. Those would be possibilities. The Colts-Jaguars game, we have nobody in this game. There's a total of 46 in this game. And I think if we wanted to roll the dice, we could play Pittman or somebody like that and hope that Joe Flacco plays. Jacksonville, we could go with a super dark horse in Christian Kirk or Brian Thomas Jr. I think there's other players I like better than that, but I'd be open to that. And then what was the other one I wanted to focus on? Maybe we hit it. Yeah, we hit all the other ones. So those would be my suggestions, unless you're thinking of somebody else.
No, so my initial thought was Nico or Diggs, like the Diggs revenge game. We all know that. We don't really know. I don't know this, but I'm basically making that storyline myself. Is that Diggs is going to want to come out and hand it to Buffalo? So that was my initial thoughts. But Nico obviously is just the better player, straight up. So obviously,
I like the idea of Diggs.
Okay,
because I didn't consider the revenge game aspect, and revenge. We were joking around the Sam Darnold revenge game, or anything like that. There are revenge game narratives that make more sense than others, and Stephon Diggs is like, you look up revenge game in the dictionary, there's a picture of Diggs. So I'm totally on board where everybody else, not everybody else, but so many other people would be taking Nico Collins. I'm on board with taking Stephon Diggs here as our last flex, if you are.
Yeah. And I do like what you were talking about with Jamar Chase as well. Like I was just kind of a little afraid. I'm kind of afraid of Cincinnati in that game for some reason. I don't know if it's rational or not, honestly.
Yeah, no, I get it, because I thought that I think anytime your team is playing Baltimore, I think about like, oh God, that's quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end. That can't be a good matchup for my guy. And honestly, most of the time it's not. So I'm fine with fading Chase in favor of Diggs. I like the idea of him just getting like a 12 for 150 and 2 touchdown game against his old team. So that's our squad that we have put together here. Kevin Szafraniec and my FFPC Weekly Challenge Week 5 lineup. Josh Allen at quarterback. The running backs are Derrick Henry, Najee Harris, Kyron Williams, and Jordan Mason. The receivers are Jaden Reed, Amari Cooper, Marvin Harrison, and Stephon Diggs. We have tight end Travis Kelce to round things out. I think you did a good job here. I think you really made a winner for somebody. You can enter that now, myffpc.com for the weekly challenge. Sign up right now. Enter for $35 or $200. You can win up to $2,500, myffpc.com, or simply scan that QR code that Matt Deutsch, our producer, has put up on the screen, and you can enter right now. Thursday game has locked. The Sunday game has not. So you can get in right now and play that. Play it with this lineup. Play it with something else too. Okay, plenty of questions to catch up on. Let's clean some of this up here in the in the YouTube chat. Mile High Luke, would you guys start Jalen Tolbert over either Josh Downs or Michael Pittman? I was talking about how much I love Tolbert earlier. I don't think I would play him over either of those players, especially considering I'm going to know whether Joe Flacco or Anthony Richardson is playing. And if it's Flacco, then I'm for sure not sitting Pittman or Downs in favor of Tolbert. So I think either way, I'm probably playing those Colts receivers over Tolbert this week.
Yeah, I'm with you too. I mean, I'm a huge Josh Downs guy. And I mean, so yeah, I mean, just straight up, no, I'm not doing that. Especially if Flacco's playing.
NK on YouTube, I'm assuming this is a redraft question. Would you trade Tyreek Hill for AJ Brown, anticipating him back after bye, or holding out hope for a Tua return? I'm pretty confident AJ Brown is going to be back in week 6. I don't know if Tua Tagovailoa is going to be back even by week 8. And even if he comes back, I don't know what he's going to look like. I don't know how much rust there is going to be to shake off. I don't know when he's going to be effective again. I do know that when AJ Brown comes back, which should be next week after the bye, feel full confidence with his quarterback there. I would make that trade. I'd trade Tyreek Hill for AJ Brown.
Yeah. I haven't really been thinking about that too much, but I think I have to be with you, because even, I know on the telecast they said that Tua says that he's, everything, he's back to normal or whatever, but I mean, you never really know, and you don't know how long it's going to last.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I haven't really thought about that until now, but I'm 100% with you on that.
JP on YouTube, should I trade CeeDee Lamb for DK Metcalf, Christian McCaffrey, and Jordan Addison? I always like getting the best player in the deal. I hate giving up all these getting all these extra players, because it means I got to cut players, and then all of a sudden my trade doesn't look so good anymore. In that deal, I'm unconvinced that Christian McCaffrey plays this season. Yeah. So I'm definitely taking the CeeDee Lamb side of that. Do not make that trade. Keep Lamb for yourself, right, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, team context always plays a huge part in that, though. Right. Like if your team is so decimated that you can get, I mean, Addison, well, even Addison isn't even a question mark after their week 6 bye. I mean, that's when he has his court date, so we don't even know. So you might be literally straight up trading DK Metcalf for CeeDee Lamb in that right. instance. So yeah, I'm with you on that. But just as a global, like, macro level thing, like, yeah, if your team is that hard up, like, sometimes you have to make those trade away a superstar to get back a few startable pieces just to salvage your season.
Right on cue. We were talking about him earlier. Cade Otton making a great catch here. I think that was Cade Otton, right? It's just a simple little dump off, and he gets about 15 yards, maybe 20 yards on it from Rachaad White. The Buccaneers are driving. They have a 3rd and 9 on Atlanta's 33 with 9.5 minutes to go in the first quarter. Oh, no, I take that back. My app stopped updating. Now we get a Mayfield pass down inside the 5-yard line. It looks like it's to Chris Godwin. It is to Chris Godwin. And now it is 1st and goal with 8 minutes to go in the first quarter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as they look to tie this game up against the Atlanta Falcons. There was one other one I wanted to get in here. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe that was it. That could have been it as far as the questions I wanted to clean up and catch up on. We talked about, the Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll step out. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to be talking about various starts and sits that may even be facing you in a lot of your fantasy leagues this weekend. We're going to talk about Xavier Legette, Hunter Henry, Noah Gray. We have a Noah Gray question in here as well. Justice Hill, the riddle smothered in secret sauce that is Justice Hill. It is Kevin Szafraniec from RotoViz. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC. You are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. We'll roll on right after this. Something called perpetual reloading to ensure something called a permanent championship window with FFPC Dynasty Leagues. How do we make sure that perpetual reloading is what we're doing in our rookie drafts every year to make sure that we're always competing for titles year in and year out?
Yeah, so we always have this tension between playing a little bit for the future and playing for the present. You'll have drafters jump into the startup. They'll draft the veterans. They're trying to win in that first year. Sometimes they do. I don't want in any way, shape, or form suggest that doesn't work, because you see some of those teams compete and win titles. And yet when we're thinking about the best way to control your chances to win, you want to be in the playoffs year after year. You want your championship window to always be open. You don't want to get to a point where you build, and then have a couple of years where you're going for it and then you're rebuilding again. You want to be in it every year. You want to get as many buys as possible so you don't have to compete in that quarterfinal round. You build a more powerful team. You can't control the injury that you have to the key player that cost you a title, or the 50-point game that a non-elite player like Amari Cooper scores and knocks you out. You can control having one of the best teams every single season. The way that you do that is you build depth in your player talent across all those positions. You build depth in your picks. In order to execute some of those types of things, you trade down, you trade peak players, you trade young players. You've got to trade things that people want. A lot of times I think when people are trying to reload or rebuild, they're trying to trade distressed assets at a level that the rest of the group isn't interested in, and then you feel like you can't move. If you're going to make trades, you got to trade things that people want. You can also trade 2 for 1.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman. He's Kevin Szafraniec from RotoViz, the Fantasy Football Report. Check out all his work over at RotoViz.com. I think we should do some starter sits. Before we do that, want to announce a touchdown in the Thursday Night Football game. It is Mike Evans who gets into the end zone to get the equalizer, as the kids say. Mike Evans, a 2-yard catch from Baker Mayfield. It is now 7-7, 7:36 to go in the first quarter. Let's do running back starter sits here, Kevin. All of these are facing some FFPC players, maybe a bunch of FFPC players this week. I want to get into it. We talked a little bit about the Chiefs running backs earlier, but what if you're facing Kareem Hunt or another guy in a backfield committee in Zach Moss in Cincinnati? If you have to pick one of those this week, Zach Moss at home against the Ravens or Kareem Hunt at home against the Saints under the lights of Monday Night Football, which one are you picking?
I'm a big Chase Brown guy, so I have kind of been leaning that way all season. I'm happy that he's starting to get more work. Wrote him up a few weeks ago saying like, hey, I think a shift is on the horizon, but I mean, I think Cincinnati is still going to use both of those guys. I mean, right now my lean is toward Hunt, even with the uncertainty around him, at least for this week, just knowing, I feel like he's going to be the leader. He's going to get the most opportunities in that backfield until he doesn't.
Hunt scares me for a couple of reasons. Not Hunt, I beg your pardon. Moss scares me for a couple of reasons. One, Chase Brown's big week last week, and then 2, the matchup against the Ravens this week. So I am leaning towards Hunt as well over Zach Moss. Justice Hill, speaking of the Ravens, wow, did I not see this coming? All these catches. I mean, he's led the team in receiving, I think 2 weeks now, 2 different weeks this season. If Derrick Henry, I can't remember who was saying this the other day, if Derrick Henry were to go down, Justice Hill might be a league winner for you this year with everything, all the action he's getting out of the backfield, catching the ball, getting in the end zone. Justice Hill still behind Derrick Henry right now. But if you're starting him at Cincinnati this week, or Javonte Williams, who this week is taking on the Raiders at home, which one would you start, Kevin?
I got to go with Javonte after what he did last week. I think that the Broncos are going to make it a point to give him a bunch of work, especially, I mean, Jaleel hasn't really been doing much in that backfield either. And I don't think Bidet is playing as well. So,
right.
I mean, I think I'd go with Javonte in a somewhat easier matchup against Las Vegas. And I mean, Hill seems like that performance is unrepeatable, and I think maybe if anything, Baltimore is going to make it a point to start getting like Flowers and the tight ends more involved over him in the passing game.
I think he has had, I'm gonna look it up right now just to verify. I think the first game of the season, Justice Hill had a 6-catch game, and then in week 4 he had a 6-catch game. And where is it? So he had 6 for 52 against Kansas City, 2 for 10 against the Raiders, 2 for 21 against the Cowboys, and then 6 for 78 and a touchdown against the Bills. Now, the other thing too, you talk about not being a repeatable thing. The Ravens were getting crushed, or they were crushing the Bills that game. So we're going to see a lot of weird stuff from both offenses in that game. And I think the Justice Hill thing is great. It's awesome if you had him going or if you had him in best ball. I don't think you can count on even 2/3 of that this week. So yeah, I think it's Javonte Williams. How about the battle for Raiders backfield supremacy? You know, we've talked about the Bengals backfield. We've talked about the Jets and the Falcons and the Buccaneers. What about Alexander Mattison or Zamir White? I think a lot of people who drafted Zamir White drafted him to be their number 2 or 3 running back, and then they got Alexander Mattison as insurance. And now, similar to the Buccaneers, we might be looking at a situation where the student has become the teacher. The apprentice is now the master, with Madison, with the Raiders saying they want to get Madison more involved. Are you strong enough to start Madison over Zamir White this week against Denver?
Let's see. I was upset there was no C option in this question.
Dylan Lobby. Let's throw Dylan Lobby in there too. Dylan Lobby, Charlie Garner, and Bo Jackson. Here we go. I don't care.
If Bo's available, I'll take him over. Bad hip at all. I mean, he's got 2 plastic hips. We're still going Bo.
Right, exactly.
But I mean, at this point, I think you almost got to go with Madison. So last week, White had negative 13.7 expected points added. And he was still outsnapped Madison 35-21 last week as well. But like, I mean, the writing's on the wall. Like at some point you just got to make a change, especially for a team, a downtrodden team that's where the Raiders are. I mean, I think you have to make the switch to Madison and at least, you know, try to change things up a little bit.
Uncle Ted on watching us on YouTube. Zamir White goes nuclear this week.
I hope so.
White destroyed the Broncos last year. I'd have to look that up. That was one of the last few games of the season, right? When White was just crushing it. I was so excited to have him on so many of my dynasty teams. I'm like, oh yeah, Zamir White's going to be the man. Then they didn't draft a running back on day 1 or day 2. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. The only thing they did was add Madison. He's not any kind of threat to Zamir White. And then the Raiders offense just has not looked great this year. Let's go to Mile High Luke in the YouTube chat. Would you start Ty Chandler, Jaleel McLaughlin, or Tyrone Tracy again with Devin Singletary getting 2 did not practices this week? If you had to play one of those guys, Chandler, McLaughlin, or Tracy, who would it be? I think I would lean here. Here's the thing. We should know Singletary's status. Like if he doesn't practice tomorrow, I think it's Tracy, right? You play Tracy over these other 2 guys. Now, if Singletary gets in even a limited practice on Friday, I think I might lean towards Chandler against the Jets. Well, it's against the Jets. God, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on this. If Singletary's active, I can't play Tracy. I think it's still Chandler. I think it's Chandler. How would you handicap this? And let us know, Kevin, how it changes if Singletary is not active for the Giants.
Well, so yeah, I'm right there with you as far as if Singletary isn't there, then it's Tracy 100%. The thing that I might have to defer to Jaleel because literally, I mean, Jones has been a workhorse over the last 2 games. It looked like at the first 2 games of the season, it looked like Chandler might force like a 66-33 committee or something like that, or even 60-40. But I mean, the last 2 games have been kind of brutal. So it just makes me feel like they're really going to lean into Jones for as long as they can. So, I mean, if Singletary plays as gross as it kind of feels right now, I feel like McLaughlin is going to get a decent amount of touches. I don't think that Javonte is going to take all the touches of the Denver backfield. And I guess I'd have to say Jaleel. I mean, I'm still leaving a candle on, but it's almost, it's almost burnt out for Jaleel at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like the matchup's better, and they're going to focus on Aaron Jones. The Vikings would focus on Aaron Jones. I guess it's McLaughlin. Yeah, and the other thing too is if you don't play Chandler, that's the 9:30 a.m. start in London. So if you don't play him, then you still have the option of potentially playing Tracy if Singletary's inactive or McLaughlin later. So I think that's what it comes down to, right? If Singletary's inactive, then you play Tracy. If Singletary is active, then it's McLaughlin. All right. Common ground has been found. Congratulations to both of us and to the listeners. Matt Deutsch saying January 7th of this year, 2024, Zamir White, 25 carries, 112 yards versus the Denver Broncos. So Uncle Ted was right. Uncle Ted was 100% right. Let's move on to wide receivers. Keenan Allen or the guy who is dealing with a heel injury right now in Wan'Dale Robinson. Who would you rather play here?
I think I have to go Keenan Allen just for the fact that if all things were equal and like both guys were healthy, I'd probably actually go Wandale at this point. But looking at our passing game matchup rater, Allen does have the best matchup of all the Chicago wide receivers this week against Carolina. So that was kind of like the defining factor on whether, which one to go with. But and especially too, if Neighbors misses time, like I say, Wandale doesn't strike me as somebody that's going to carry that offense either. So
no, and they don't have anybody to carry that offense. Like there's no Saquon Barkley on that team this year. So yeah, it could be rough. I think it's Allen. I was going to say we have a new score in the Thursday night game, but we don't, because Younghoe Koo just missed a 41-yard field goal, pushed it left after the Falcons had been driving. It is now it is now Tampa Bay ball. 3:30 to go in the first quarter. Tampa has it at their own 22-yard line, I want to say, something like that, 23. Anyway, Josh Downs or Xavier Legette. Xavier Legette, a hot pickup in a bunch of leagues where he was available this week for Carolina, coming off his best game as a rookie versus Josh Downs. Again, we don't know who's going to be a quarterback as it stands right now between Richardson and Joe Flacco. You can couch this if you want. Downs if it's Flacco, or Legette if it's Richardson. How do you feel about this?
I was excited to see Legette finally, have a good game. When I wrote him up earlier in the offseason, I kind of predicted him as a bust, just looking at his college profile. But I guess I wasn't happy about it because, like, he's got a good story and I wanted him to succeed. But I still got to go Downs. Downs is my guy. Regardless, how about this? I don't know if this is hot takey. Downs regardless of quarterback.
Oh, spicy. And you know what? It kind of for his role on that team, maybe that makes more sense that I don't want to say he's quarterback proof. I could go either way on this, but that Bears secondary is pretty good. And I don't think Dalton is going to be throwing the ball all over successfully as he was the last 2 weeks. So yeah, I'll get on board for Downs over Legette. Now, here's an interesting one. Michael Wilson, who I believe has seen 16 targets the last 2 weeks, versus Allen Lazard, who is looking like a different receiver the last really all season, quite frankly. When you look at what Lazard has been able to do so far this year, it's something that I never saw coming. I thought he was never all that great with Green Bay. He was a number one receiver by like he had to be at that point, like a de facto number one wide receiver. And yet this past week, 5 catches for 58 yards. This is coming off a 3 catch for 48-yard game. He had 3 for 48. He had 6 catches for 89 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Niners in week 1. Lazard or Michael Wilson, which hot hand are we riding here?
If we knew for sure Trey McBride wasn't going to play, I'd say Wilson, just because they kind of fill in that role, even though Dortch had the better game last week. And I honestly, I'm just not an Allen Lazard guy. So
I'm not either.
I'm okay with rolling with the guy that has, I feel like, has a little more upside. But it does look like, from what I can tell, it does seem like Trey McBride's going to play this week. I don't know if you've heard anything different. So that does put a damper on that.
The only thing I've seen is that he got upgraded to a full practice today. And which is, he's coming out of a concussion protocol. So that's a good sign. Chris Godwin with an 11-yard catch. This was right after Bucky Irving ripped off or was this Bucky Irving? I think Bucky Irving, after Godwin catches that pass, Bucky Irving rips off about a 15-yard run. So he's looking good so far as well. And the Buccaneers are driving on Thursday Night Football here. 16-yard gain for Bucky Irving. Moving on to the tight ends, Cole Kmet or David Njoku. We talked about Njoku a little bit earlier. Cole Kmet's had a couple of nice games, though, too. A guy that I think the Bears kind of left for dead when they went out and got Gerald Everett. But now Kmet has strung together some nice-looking performances. Would you be playing Njoku over Kmet this week?
Yeah, if he's in, I don't think it's much of a discussion really with that Cleveland matchup versus Washington. I think you're just pretty much throwing throwing in the top wide receiver and top tight end. I don't know if you're rushing to throw Elijah Moore in your lineups or anything like that. But I think those top two guys, yeah, you just throw them in. I mean, it's and they're like you say, Kmet can always go off. He's one of my favorite guys. He's a super efficient tight end. But I mean, there's just so many mouths to feed in that Chicago passing game that it's going to be really hit or miss. Where I think if Njoku's in there, he's like top 2 targets on that Cleveland offense.
Yeah, he should be for sure. Even with, well, let's bring up Judy right now because Mile High Luke has a question. Jordan Whittington, Dontavian Wicks, or Jerry Judy? It's Wicks for me this week, man. I mean, like even if Romeo Doubs plays, I'm rolling with Wicks.
Yeah, I think that's how you roll too. I mean, Judy has quietly been like the wide receiver 32 in PPR this year, so it's not like he's not nothing, but at the same time, he's not going to get anybody that excited. And I think Wicks. I mean, you're definitely getting excited for Wicks. So.
What about, and tell me if my logic is flawed on this one, Mile High Luke, Jalen Tolbert, Jordan Whittington, or Tyrone Tracy? I think Tolbert is third on this on this list. It comes down to Whittington or Tracy. And again, I'll go back to if Singletary is active, it's going to be Whittington. If Singletary's inactive, I would start Tyrone Tracy. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, that is actually a tough one. I don't know. I might go against you. So I might
hold on. So you would say Tolbert?
I might. I mean, that's such a close call that, I mean, it's really you throwing everything up in the air and seeing where it lands is where you feel on that one. And I think, I like Tolbert in that situation. I don't necessarily like Tracy against the Seahawks defense. And I mean, the thing that Whittington's got going for him is the high point total in that game against the Packers. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that really is that's probably one of the roughest questions we've got.
It is. What about if Singletary is out? Does Tracy vault to the top of the list, or does he still not?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess you got to go with the guaranteed volume at that point because we don't really know, because Tolbert or Whittington could each get 2 targets, one catch. Something where if Singletary's out, that he's going to be getting some volume, regardless if it's good volume or not. He's going to be getting some volume.
What about this from Jose Avalos, who's watching us on YouTube? He has to pick 2 receivers, or 2 flexes off this list of receivers: Ayuk, Addison, Odunze, Shakir, or Shaheed. I'm going to start Ayuk out of those guys, and then after that, it's a bit of a conundrum. Normally, I'd say Addison, but the matchup isn't great. Shakir is interesting because he's been kind of the lead receiver for Buffalo, and that's a high total game. I might say Ayuk and Shakir here over Addison, Odunze, and Shaheed, even though Shaheed had the big game last week too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Shakir's been one of my favorite guys all season long. So, I mean, it's just so hard to trust Ayuk. I mean, he's got to pay off that contract at some point, right? It's got to be coming. It's got to be coming.
I think for me, it's just like I recognize the talent. I recognize that Purdy is humming. I recognize that this should be a good week for the Niners offense. I'm willing to bet on that when those are my other options. That's why I say Ayuk and Shakir. I'm with you. Like, this is a guy that I have warmed up to over the course of the last few weeks, so I'm definitely on board with him there. And by the way, Matt Deutsch saying, our producer, Shakir didn't practice today. So that's something to be concerned about. Now, if Shakir doesn't go, who's next on this list between Addison, Odunze, and Shaheed? I don't think it's Shaheed. I might be Odunze. I don't know. Who would be third on this list for you?
I'd like Addison. I mean,
Addison against the Jets.
Yeah. It's kind of a rough matchup, but also too, if they're going to put Sauce will be on Jefferson all game. Yeah, I'm not opposed to
you know what? That's a good point. Yeah. And who's the other guy? The opposite, DJ Reed. Is that the other corner that they have in New York, if I'm remembering correctly? He can be had. Sauce Gardner usually cannot be had, but Reed definitely can. So yeah, I think it is Addison, number 3. Chase McLaughlin nails a 53-yard field goal to give the Buccaneers a 10-7 lead. The Buccaneers have it just inside their own 40 on third down. That is probably going to be the final play of the first quarter as they head to a commercial on Amazon on Prime Video. But we will be right here because we are not taking a commercial break. Hunter Henry or Isaiah Likely is next on the list. Hunter Henry or Isaiah Likely at tight end. When you look at the matchups this week, Isaiah Likely is taking on the Cincinnati Bengals, and then Hunter Henry is going to be battling the Dolphins. I am leaning towards Likely in Cincinnati in this matchup, but I can be persuaded. How do you feel about it, Kevin?
I had to revert to our strength of schedule streaming app, and neither of them are great matchups. So I think I would maybe go with Hunter Henry, just not with that Baltimore, the uncertainty of how that passing game is going to shake out. And then maybe they get off to a big lead. I mean, Hunter Henry is kind of the top guy in that passing offense, or at least he's shown he can be. I mean, Demario Douglas takes a week. Jalen Polk kind of takes, a snap or two as the wide receiver one. But I mean, I think just clearing the way there, Hunter Henry's might be the better play, but I mean, that's a rough one, man. Let me say the tight end has been, it's not fun picking tight ends in 2024.
No, and then you talked about loading up on multiple tight ends. That's even doubly worse, right? Oh God, it's pain. The pain is real. The struggle is even realer. Noah Gray or Juwan Johnson. This is for the FFPC sickos out there that are looking for tight end to exploit the tight end premium stuff in their second flex this week. Noah Gray or Juwan Johnson. I actually have to play Noah Gray in a non-tight end premium league this week, which I'm not looking forward to, thanks to Sam Laporta being on bye and TJ Hawkinson not being recovered yet. It's a dynasty league, obviously, that I'm in. It was unfortunate, but it is what it is. Noah Gray or Juwan Johnson, who would you rather play this week, Kevin?
Well, just knowing how bad, actually both teams are defenses are really bad against the tight end. But I mean, Juwan Johnson's kind of like one of my guys, so I got to stick with him. But no, Gray, I mean, that's not a bad matchup for him either. Especially, obviously, we know with the lack of receivers that Kansas City has. But I mean, and the rough thing is, it's like there's like these Foster Moreau sightings. We're like going into the season, I said like Juwan Johnson's the guy. Like at least he's the tight end one in that offense. And then week one comes around and like Foster Moreau's, doubling up on targets. So I'm going to go with the guy that I think is athletically gifted and facing, a Kansas City defense that let, Likely and Mike Gesicki blow up on him. So I'll go with Juwan Johnson on that.
Okay, and that's fine. I think Juwan, it's weird for two tight ends ranked outside the 20 by most people. We're actually kind of like, yeah, actually both of these guys you could make work in week 5. Quarterbacks, let's move on to them and finish up strong here. We'll go to Jose Avalos, who is in watching us on YouTube right now. Geno Smith or Caleb Williams. You know us, we're both going to say Geno Smith.
Yeah, amen.
Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson this week. Would you play your beloved Deshaun Watson? I don't know if he's beloved.
No, please, no, he's not. No.
Would you rather start the starting quarterback for your beloved Cleveland Browns over Patrick Mahomes this week? I come back to it. I'm not a strong man. I'm playing Mahomes.
Yeah, and I just can't. Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I don't even want to tell you all the reasons that I don't want to start Deshaun Watson this week. As juicy as the matchup is, like, I just can't force myself to do it. You got to go with the guy that's tracking to be like the greatest quarterback of all time. If we were sitting, this was like 2020, this would be a discussion worth having, maybe. But, in 2024, even with the state of both franchises, I don't think it's a question.
I was thinking that the total on that Browns Commanders game was so much higher. It's 43.5. The Chiefs 43. So it's about the same. Give me Mahomes. It's and not that I make my decisions based on totals, but I thought it was projected to be a higher scoring game than that. Kyler Murray or CJ Stroud this week. Two guys that, I don't know, unless it's an auction, you probably don't have them on the same team. But what would you think between those two guys, Murray or Stroud this week, if you could only pick one?
I'm still going with Stroud, even though he's kind of underperforming. It's kind of sad because he was one of those guys that I thought could go for like the 5,050 sort of season this year, right, with the weapons and stuff he has. And I'm still going with him. Even though I've been super impressed with Stroud so far, I've been less impressed by Kyler at this point. So I'm going with the guy that has three really high end weapons, and I do believe Tank Dell is tracking to play this week. I believe he's been practicing. So even regardless if Tank Dell does not play, I'm still going with Stroud.
What's funny is 57 rushing yards, 59 rushing yards, 45 rushing yards, 3 rushing yards to Kyler Murray last week when he was limping. If he's not running, I mean, that's why you would play Murray over Stroud, right? And if he's not running, well, what's the point? So yeah, I'm with you. It's Stroud this week. Last one. Let's assume Anthony Richardson is active and starting for the Colts this week against the Jaguars. Would you play him over Dak Prescott?
I don't at this point. I mean, I know the Steelers are a tough matchup, but I just don't think you can. I don't think you can play Anthony Richardson at that point. And I was one of his biggest cheerleader rah-rah guys. Like everything that he's, that I've heard and read about him says like he wants to be great and he's willing to put in the work and but he still comes out and looks like, he'll have one great throw and then followed by one throw where you're just like, are you're a professional quarterback? And at some point, the rushing doesn't matter that much. It's not like he's getting a ton of rushing work, and he already has, gotten hurt this year. He seems like he's a little better at avoiding hits, but not that much better than what we saw last year. So, I mean, I just think, Dak was CD and Dak, it's not like Dak's a slouch in the rushing department either. I don't really think it's much of a question, unfortunately.
That CeeDee Lamb, Joey Porter Jr. matchup, I am here for it. That is going to be a fun one to watch this week for sure. This has been a fun show to do with you tonight, Kevin. Before we let you go enjoy the rest of the Buccaneers-Falcons game, which is still 10-7, Kevin Szafraniec at the Cat Dad FF on X, and of course the RotoViz Fantasy Football Report and the Waiver Wire show that you're doing Tuesday nights, right? Am I forgetting anything else besides all the stuff that you're writing for RotoViz.com too?
Yeah, I pretty much on a pretty strict schedule on Monday. I'm putting out a Monday review article, pretty much picking the top 3 highlights of the week that was, and then writing about that. Then Tuesday I have my waiver article that comes out, and then every Thursday, so just dropping today, there's a wide receiver advanced stat article that comes out, and then in between I'm kind of doing like individual player takey guys. We call it the newsroom. It's more bite-sized articles, specifically like player focused, and those are a ton of fun to write as well. So I mean, pretty much I got an article coming out like every day. If you go on RotoViz any day of the week, there's going to be a new article for me like plastered at the top of the site. So just go over there and check it out. We got great stuff across the board coming out every day on the site. So everything anybody needs.
I'm a huge fan of RotoViz, have been since day one for sure. Keep up the great work there, Kevin. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was a ton of fun, man.
MyFFPC.com is where to go to play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. I want to thank Kevin Szafraniec and our producer, Matt Deutsch. Next Thursday, 7 p.m., Casey Kasem from Rotoballer will join me. She and I will take you up till the start of the Thursday night football game next week. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. For Kevin Szafraniec and Matt Deutsch, I'm Eric Balkman. Enjoy the rest of the game tonight. This is the Better Sports Network.